All right, so I drove around for almost 2 hours trying to find a spot that was protected from the wind, and unfortunately I was unable to. There's less wind here in my driveway, so I'm gonna try doing a painting using another painting for inspiration. I'm gonna try to do a smaller panorama just using the top portion of the painting. So in other words, I am going to cut off the bottom and mostly just focus on this portion here. I'll be painting on a 10 by 20 inch canvas, and I'll be using my usual palette of colors. Thinning some burnt sienna with odorless mineral spirits, focusing on some big shapes here. Something I've been trying to do a lot lately is keep the initial lines fairly loose and sketchy and try to lay in some of the big shapes quickly. And I'm just using a number 2 synthetic flat to sketch out the shapes. See, so there's a shoreline that comes down like this. Some trees up on the top. It's kind of a breaking wave right in here. It kind of arches up, sort of like that. So this will be a whitewater pattern right here. There are hills in the distance, and then there are some cliffs in the foreground. And I'm going to bring them out to about here. And there are distant cliffs out here like that. And I'm going to wipe out the distant mountain here. I think I want to bring it down a little lower. Maybe something like this. Maybe I'll have this come down a little lower as well. So this will be the distant mountain right here. All right, I've got a dark mixture here of ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, and a touch of burnt sienna. And I've mixed in a bit of Gamblin's Neo McGilp, which is sort of like liquid. It's kind of a gel. Sometimes when I paint on canvas, I don't even use medium, but today I decided to. It does help the paint go on quickly. I think I want to bring down these rocks a little bit, maybe like this. This dark mixture is semi-transparent, and it's sort of leaning towards purple, but when I get the painting indoors, it's not as saturated of a purple. There's some dark bits along the top of the cliffs, some other dark shapes in the cliffs over here and here. Shoreline goes this way. I'm using a number 4 natural bristle filbert. I don't want this line to be too straight here because there are rocks on the beach breaking up that line. Even though I'm working from a painting, I'm still squinting at the subject to simplify the shapes. I've added a bit more burnt sienna to my dark mix for the rocks in the foreground here, and also for these rocks here. I haven't actually painted in my studio for almost 2 years. Whenever I need to do touch-ups or if I want to do a painting using a plein air painting as inspiration, I'll just set up in my driveway. I just like the light out here. I'm used to the light I get when plein air painting, and so I feel like I'm just doing my normal thing. I'm not changing my process. All right, I've mixed up a warm green here using ultramarine blue, cadmium yellow medium, and a touch of alizarin crimson. Whenever I use a painting as inspiration for another painting, I do not try to make an exact replica of the painting. I try to view the painting the same way I would view the landscape when out plein air painting, as I mentioned before, just using it as inspiration. And oftentimes there are changes that I think would improve the composition. So of course I make those changes. I added a bit of titanium white to this distant bit of green out here to push it back a bit. Even though I'm just approximating colors and values at this point, I will try to get the colors as accurate as possible. And there's some distant trees on the top of the distant hills. And as you can hear, I live near the San Francisco International Airport. And I don't really notice the sound of the planes unless I'm doing something like this, and then I notice how often they take off. Before living in this house, I lived in a small house on the train tracks, and at midnight, every night a freight train would go by and literally rock the whole house. And the first couple nights trying to go to sleep, I thought, how am I going to sleep here? But I actually came to like that midnight train. It's amazing what you get used to. Hills, so I'm going to adjust this cliff here a bit. Have this one here like this. I think that's a little better. Kind of breaks up that space. It was just like there's two parallel lines along here. So now I'm using my dark purple mixture to reinforce the shapes along the top of the cliffs. I'm going over this green here to cool it off. I feel like it's a little too saturated. I want to push it back into the distance. All right, for the distant mountain, I've got a mixture of titanium white, ultramarine blue, and a touch of alizarin crimson. I can tell already this is a little bit too dark. That's all right. It's easy enough to lighten up. I've switched over to a number 6 natural bristle flat. And for the sky, I've got a mixture here of titanium white, ultramarine blue, and phthalo blue. It looks like I toned the canvas on my original painting, and that's something I don't do that often anymore. But it can be nice to have bits of the orange coming through in the sky. It creates a feeling of light. I do also like painting over a white canvas. And I'm just using paint that was on my palette from my previous painting. Some of it is dried up, but most of it is still usable. For the water, I've got a grayed down blue-green mixture. My go-to for seawater is usually ultramarine blue and titanium white with a touch of burnt sienna to gray down the mix, and then I'll adjust from there. In this case, I did add a little bit of cadmium yellow medium. The burnt sienna will often push the mix enough towards green that I don't need to actually add any yellow. Added some titanium white to the mix. Going with my usual process here of trying to cover the whole canvas or panel quickly. And then I step back and take a look at what I've got. And I will fix any obvious issues. But I'll also be looking for things that are working, little bits of magic that I want to be sure not to paint over. For the cliffs, I'm starting with a saturated mixture here using permanent red medium, cadmium yellow medium, and a little bit of titanium white. I will be adding some lighter, less saturated bits to these cliffs, but I want to establish some saturation first, and then I can adjust, adding a bit of titanium white, cooling off the mix for the cliffs in the distance. Use this color for the sand as well. And I'm picking up some of that purple, but that's all right. This little spot right here is kind of a bright green because it's in the foreground, and there are bits of brighter green along the top of the cliffs over here as well. I step back every few minutes to take a look at the big shapes, and I feel like I want this breaking wave to come a little bit further forward like this, so there's more of an angle. I think that's a little better. And then along here there's some white water. Now I'm adding some light areas on these cliffs because they are pretty light in value. Still using the number 6 natural bristle flat. Added some more cadmium yellow medium and a touch more permanent red medium to the mix. I killed a little too much of the saturation, so now adding it back. Okay, adding some titanium white to the distant mountains to lighten them up. Something I've learned from experience, I always paint the distant mountains too dark. I'm paying attention to the value relationship between the sky and the mountains. And the sky is much lighter than the mountains, but the mountains are lighter than the trees along the ridge of this hill. For the sky mixture, I originally leaned the mix towards ultramarine, but I feel like I'm not getting enough of a lighting effect in the sky. So I'm going over the sky with a mixture of titanium white with phthalo blue, which creates more of a cerulean color. All right, so here's what I finished up with. I spent about an hour and a half on this painting. After scrubbing in approximate colors with thin paint, I came back over with thicker, more intentional strokes. And what I mean by that is I would load the brush, make a stroke, load the brush, make a stroke. As I mentioned, I was using the previous painting as inspiration, but I was not trying to stay exactly true to it. In fact, there were some things that I wanted to change. For example, in the original painting, these distant hills were a little bit too straight across, so I made some adjustments there. And the distant mountain is maybe a little bit bigger. I think the shape of the wave is a little bit different as well. All right, so I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you'd like to see some extra videos and help support the channel, there's a Patreon link down below. It's the Patreon support that helps keep me making these videos, and it's much appreciated. I also put a PayPal tip jar down below as well, so check it out. Other than that, stay creative. I'll see you guys in the next video.